So prayer and proclamation and uncertainty and change. I talk like this I gave last year twice, but because Jim kind of spoke to me and he said a lot of the people in this group are sort of ministry entrepreneurs, or they're starting something and they were just getting off the ground, or they were just getting momentum, or they were just about to move, or they were just about to really take action on their wildly important goals, and the world stopped. And it's very hard to find meaning. Like the meaning maker inside us has a hard time with that. So what can we do? What can I say to that? And I would say Acts 10. So here's what I'm after. Since we can't clarify our mission anymore, since the mission has changed, like the core of it, the Great Commission is the same, but like how to execute, how to measure outcomes, how to identify what are good possibilities, how to know when to move someone overseas, or how to know when to move someone into a city, all that's scrambled, it's all jacked up. What if we stopped trying for a while to clarify our mission and our mission statements, and instead clarified our kung fu? What if we identified what does it take to make a person who can actually thrive in chaos? What kinds of people can flourish when everything is sideways, when they have been categorically, Jehu, interrupted? What kinds of people do better in that environment? What kinds of people don't need a map because they can read the wind, and how do we cultivate those? What kinds of people can pull off a game changer? Acts 10 is a game changer. It's a moment in mission history almost unparalleled. There's the resurrection of Jesus, and then there's kind of Acts 10. And then a couple things that happen with Paul, and then after that, it all kind of pales next to this massive moment right here in Acts 10. Peter at no point had any idea what he was doing, and he had no idea what was going on. And 0% of it had ever been laid out in a strategy statement or in a dream statement. He hadn't pitched it to donors. None of this had ever been clear to him, and he still was able to respond because of his responsiveness. He was able to respond and participate in a very significant movement. All right, so in this story, in this Acts 10 story, I want to notice maybe 5 things with you. And I'm going to notice them a little bit quickly because this is being recorded, but feel free to throw a flag and send a question when you get one. So the first thing that I think is important to notice is that the mission action doesn't start with the worker in this story. It starts out there. The first scene is Cornelius. Cornelius has a vision, Peter has a vision. Cornelius considers and responds obediently. Peter considers, responds obediently. But it is not that the worker gets a burden in his heart and has a vision for something and then goes and executes on it. God's action starts out in the world in this story. That's very reassuring to me right now because my internal sensors are a little bit wobbly, and my ability to process complex thoughts is a little bit diminished after 5 weeks in lockdown. It is comforting to know that God is active out in the world, and that maybe my job isn't to start something, but to see something. That my job isn't to push it, but to perceive it, and then to say out loud what I'm seeing. That might be a beautiful kind of obedience, where we live in a world that God is constantly active in, especially when we are interrupted. And then our job is to see and say, maybe not to start and push. That's one thing I notice in this passage. Oh, the people that are called sent, I love this part. The people that are called sent in this passage are not the apostolic workers. It's Cornelius' servants. It's a couple of Roman soldiers. They get this special word that is typically applied to the apostolic worker. It isn't even the apostle that's called sent in this story. That gives me the grins and the giggles. Okay, the second thing that I want to underscore for you is that praying the hours supports extraordinary guidance. So in this passage, depending on your translation, you either hear that Cornelius was praying at the 9th hour and Peter was praying at the 6th, or you might hear 3 o'clock noon. This isn't arbitrary. In Acts 4, Peter and John went to pray. There's a children's song about it in English. Peter and John went to pray, and they met a lame man on the way. He asked for alms and held out his palms, and Peter said some good stuff. But it doesn't read that they went to pray. It says they went to the prayers. They were on their way to the prayers. They gathered regularly at set hours of the day and prayed. It's this practice that Muhammad witnessed and that gave rise to namaz, the Muslim practice of praying 5 times a day. Building the day around prayer reshapes the work we do in the interim. It allows extraordinary prayer to be ordinary and mundane. Building the day around prayer makes us prayerful. And even beyond the formative effect that it has on us. In times of crisis and uncertainty, you want to be checking communications more often, not less. And you don't want it to be hard to do so. Wise people build comms checks into their lives. That's what smart people do. Inside this ordinary, mundane habit, an extraordinary thing happened. And that shouldn't surprise us because that is literally the story of the Bible, right? And that's the third thing I notice here. Look for the extraordinary in the ordinary. Both of these guys have visions during their mundane daily prayers. Peter goes up, it's like, I'm hungry, and the people are like, well, we'll go make lunch, and he sits down, a vision. Angel of the Lord appears to Cornelius, but they weren't looking for visions. They were just sitting down for their normal hour, their normal time on the clock to pray. This has always been happening through the whole Bible. There's a bush with a fire in it. A nexus between worlds housed in a tent. God in flesh. And mystery in bread and wine. The story of the Bible is the story of God coaching us to create ordinary practices into which extraordinary revelation can be poured. The unusual is continually happening. It's happening everywhere. Elizabeth Barrett Browning says every bush is ablaze with God, but only those who see take off their shoes. So if we were to pray and keep an eye out for burning bushes on the inside, burning bushes on the outside. A burning bush on the inside looks like longing. It looks like a desire that you've always had. It's always been there. It's always somehow shaped the decisions that you've made. Or a new longing that comes out of nowhere, but you can't put it down. Or a resistance. I don't want to. Like Peter's, no, Lord. Resistances are fascinating places to look for guidance in. When there's resistance underneath it, there's almost always something really, really important. Burning bush, and sometimes a burning bush on the inside will be a word from the scripture that drops into your heart and you feel it right here, until eventually it settles down in your gut in absolute certainty that is incontrovertible, and you know it means something for you. A burning bush on the outside might be an invitation that you didn't see coming, an opportunity that you can't get out of your head, a need that hurts you. The word that applied to Jesus, splangnidzomai, moved with compassion. It hurts you in your gut, and you can't let it let go of you. You can't let it let go of you. These things on the outside may well interrupt what you thought was your work. Right now in this interim, this kind of pause moment where everything's in the air and we're all still trying to push our work forward, I wonder what would happen if we were to just sit back and say, what is in my heart right now? What is in my field of view right now? And where am I strong? How can I put these three things together? If we all kind of maybe stopped trying to drive our ministries and just were leaves in the wind, just let go of what was important and look for the extraordinary and chase it. I kind of wonder what would happen. The fourth thing I notice is that it's listen, obey, not plan, execute. I have to tell you, this one took me 20. Yeah.
Virgil, you're doing great. Keep it up.
Oh, thanks, Jim. Aw.
Verbal affirmation.
Thank you for that. That's good. That warms me in my heart. I colored this one orange in honor of you, Jim. It's listen, obey, not plan, execute. This one's hard for me because I'm a whiteboard guy. I would turn the computer if I could to show you a big, giant, monstrous whiteboard. And there's place for strategic thinking inside the contemplative path. But contemplative Christianity is like the monkish stuff, the praying the hours, offering lament, the looking in your heart, the deep quiet stuff, the sitting in silence stuff. Missional Christianity is the identify the target audience, find out what they need, move toward the lost, download the app on your phone for the unreached. These are not poles though. They're not opposite, although frequently I watch people talk to each other from these groups as though they are. The contemplatives look at the missionals and they call them workaholics because they kind of are workaholics. And the missionals look at the contemplatives and they say, when are you going to get off your Jedi pillow and go actually help somebody? Because some of them do spend a lot of time on their Jedi pillow. But these are not poles. They're threads of a single strand. They're the inner and outer. They're the above the water and below the water. For Peter, rhythmic prayer made space for an ecstatic event, a contemplative experience, an encounter. And it's theology-busting encounter. God says to Peter to directly contradict what God said before. That's hard to do. Really hard to do, right? Especially for an obedient Bible reader. But he reflects, and in the reflecting, there's an opportunity for the Spirit to give an express instruction. So instead of wondering how to fit this in my theology, he just acts on the instruction. This yields an event of almost unparalleled missional magnitude. Other examples of this are Jesus, like leaving places where he's supposed to be helping people because the Spirit said go somewhere else. But Jesus made room to hear that. You see this happen with Paul in the Areopagus. You see this happen with Paul in Acts 16. You see Paul and Barnabas mobilized out of a non-missional prayer event in Acts 13. But how often is hearing the voice taught as the foundational skill? If you go get discipleship curricula, one of two things is taught as the first skill for disciples. Either how to read your Bible or how to share your testimony. But disciples are disciples because they can hear their teacher. I wonder if we don't teach people how to hear because we don't know how to listen well enough to teach it. But the way that the mission unfolds in Acts is that the disciples listen and obey, even when it contradicts plan and execute. But the things that we think are important to us, like assumptions, like the givens that we think are really, we hold these truths to be self-evident, right? That we have the right to stay alive and to be free and to get money. Every culture has its assumptions. Assumptions that we think are good and beautiful, a rigid and well tricked out theology, or adherence to a plan. Any of those things could have completely derailed this missional moment. Things that we draw strength and courage from sometimes could have derailed this missional moment. Maybe. Who knows what God's work around that. I mean, certainly Peter would have missed it. All right, and then number 5. I don't know where I am on time, but number 5. This is the last one before a little bit of review and questions. It's discovery and not delivery. Those of us from the West, from the United States especially, our incipient capitalism has bled into our thinking about how mission and ministry are done, how disciples are made. We are continually trying to deliver a product or a service to a needy market. I've got a friend here in Spain who I think he has on his desk, like, delivering Jesus to the places he's never been. Can you name a place Jesus hasn't been? I'm pretty sure that guy holds the atoms of the cosmos together by the sheer force of his presence. I'm pretty sure that he's everywhere. Paul never said that the God of this world has made Jesus unable to get to the people. He said the God of this world has blinded their minds to the glory of God in the face of Christ. So our job then, what if our job isn't to get Jesus to people? What if our job is to discover Jesus? To look for him? What if we are explorers and not entrepreneurs? This is Peter's journey in this passage. It's a discovery journey. First off, Lord, no, right? A big resistance. Pay attention to those resistances. The next thing he says is to the people downstairs. When the guys knock, 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 and the three people show up at the door, and he says, "Here I am, what do you want?" He learned that question from Jesus. It's the number one question Jesus ever asked. It's the question Jesus is always asking you, by the way. What do you want? So he goes with the guys, the two Roman soldiers. This is a frightening one-day journey. Who knows if he's going to wind up in a hole or in jail? He gets to Cornelius and he says, "God has shown me, I've discovered something about myself. Let me tell you, God showed me I was a bigot and I don't need to be a bigot. Here I am, what can I do for you?" Right? What do you want? And then Cornelius says, "Well, I was praying and there was this angel and he said to go get you and he would come with this message." What is the message God gave you to tell us? And nowhere in this story did God give Peter a message for Cornelius. There's no, "Behold, I have sent you to Cornelius." God talks like that. "I have sent you to Cornelius with this message." Nowhere. Doesn't occur anywhere in the passage. God has a message for Peter. And Peter's obedience metabolizes that into mission. And Peter is still discovering the message for him at Cornelius's house. It's both formative for Peter and deliverance for Cornelius. So Peter says, not only did I discover something about me, I just discovered something about God. God is also not a bigot. I didn't see that coming, right? And then he tells the Jesus story, and everyone is baptized in the Holy Spirit and speaks in languages they don't know. And Peter says, well, he doesn't have to be terribly sharp to see this, but he's like, I perceive God's up to something. Let's respond and baptize some folk. For Peter, the ministry of the word was discovery. It wasn't delivery of something he learned in a nice packaged manner. It was, this is what I'm seeing right now. I am seeing God in the world right now, and it's doing this to me, and that was the gospel for them. In uncertainty, this has always been the case. It's always been the case, but in uncertainty now, when we just don't have our act together, we can't figure out what to do, when we're a little bit frightened about what's going to happen, when we keep saying herd immunity, but like no one's immune to the cold, and none of us can go to sleep. Think about like when everything is jacked up. Questions beat answers every time. If we were to go looking for mystery and then just talking about it, I wonder how far that would get the whole story. I wonder if that would move the story of Jesus in the world forward much better than anything we could drum up, package, and feel marginally confident about. So let's review. This massive missional moment was facilitated by intentional communal rhythms. Peter's people prayed this way. Listening, attention, and reflection. And these are skills that the contemplative stream of Christianity has honed over millennia. And so you can learn how to do this from people who know how. An open, flexible theology. If your theology is inflexible and you are sure you are right, you are likely to disobey Jesus. Just want to say that to you. An open, flexible theology leaves room for a total commitment to a person, Jesus. Your theology does not deserve your allegiance. Your Jesus does. Showing all the way up, even though it put him at great personal risk. We didn't talk about that because time, but like Peter could have gone to jail anywhere along the way. And asking questions and then perceiving and responding. All he needed to do to fail was have unchallenged assumptions or no rhythm to his inner journey, or a rigid, comforting theology, or a rigid mission story he was trying to live, or a need to succeed at a plan. That's all it would have taken to jack this story up. But the good news is he never had to know what was going on, and he never had to know what he was doing. He just had to know how to listen and be willing to take risks to discover. I love that because I am tired of being a spiritual entrepreneur, and I am so geared to be a spiritual explorer. I want to find him in all the places he is at play and then make a big giant deal out of it. All right, so I'm going to put these invitations up, but here's what I would do if I were you. I would notice in the duration of this talk, which things did you sense the most resonance with? Which things did your heart say, yes, that? Pay attention to that. Which things did you sense the most dissonance with? Did your heart go, ah, man, yeesh, or a little bit of fear or anxiety? Pay attention to that. And once you have noticed what goes in each of those columns, ask the Lord, what would you like me to do with this? And I think that, in my opinion, is maybe how you should live the Corona years.